Despite the nostalgia, I gotta say that this first episode does have flaws, like the really bad voice acting, and while the animation is pretty nice for the time, it still obviously isn't too appealing either. However, most characters are fine here, and Rocky is in one of his peak moments of the entire series, so that's A+. And also the beam challenge isn't bad, as it has pretty intense moments. 6 out of 10. Definitely worse than BFDI 1A, the parts where people were talking about crushes really felt weird, and the fact that a recent video with the same problem came out doesn't help this episode either.
Don't worry, Candle!
Out of the way!
Thank you, my spoon and silver armor.
Golds, I turned golds. It could happen!
Also, moments like Pin wiggling despite being a solid object and Pin vomiting on Woody made me and many other people start to question the anatomy of these objects. As for the challenge, most of it was boring, only the end part was fun to watch. 5 out of 10. As the first elimination of the entire series, Flower's elimination was pretty intense despite the few votes. As for the challenge, I love how the entire obstacle course is pretty fun to watch, and they use a great song to accompany this challenge. Plus you never know who's gonna get ahead and get in the lead, and the reveal that Blocky didn't actually die was also really neat. This is also where Blocky's funny doings started appearing, which is the best type of ad of the entire series. 8 out of 10. This episode is kinda lame overall. The test idea is alright, but with stuff like pencils filler a doodle, which again makes us wonder of how these objects function in terms of biology. Pencil and Match hating on Bubble for no reason, and the cheating thing with Blocky kinda made the episode pretty boring for the most part. The best part about this episode was Rocky kicking tennis ball though, and overall this is probably peak Rocky performance. We've reached the best Rocky moment.
It only goes downhill from here.
4 out of 10. While this episode has very few saving traits, the few good things about it is that it's sometimes pretty funny, like with Golf Ball being universally hated, and also the dice rolling out very funny numbers from time to time, not to mention that Flower being back is pretty cool. But the rest of this episode is very lame, like the fact that this is the episode that started the horrible Rocky vomiting trend. Some of the rankings are unfair, and the second half of the contest is literally 15 seconds long compared to the first half of the contest. Not to mention the cherries were robbed from a win here. 2 out of 10. This one is kinda boring for the most part. The bridge challenge is really nothing to write home about, and the elimination sucks considering Woody, my old favorite character, got eliminated here. But the one thing that's amazing in this episode is the pen joke that happens during the challenge.
But don't you want to win and get Dream Island? I do. When I win, there'll be a big sign in front saying Pen Island, no spaces, all caps.
Yes! Honey, he did it!
But besides that, nothing that fun. 6 out of 10. This episode marks the first moment where win tokens started to become useless, as they actually never saved a single person. And because of that, I'm going to ask any of you guys to make a video with the following prompt: BFDI but win tokens actually save people. This means that win tokens would save characters like Pin, Needle, and Golf Ball. That should probably be a fun prompt to think about. But anyways, the challenge is fun. The small teams are pretty good, and the overall challenge being divided in smaller challenges was solid and fun to watch. 7 out of 10. Oh my god, this episode is so boring. There's literally nothing to say about it except Fury joining the squashy grapes. The rest is either a boring challenge or a racer being a jerk. He's kinda mean for no reason in this episode. Needle's win token was used for nothing, once again proving that win tokens are useless, and the squishy cherries are dumber than ever. Literally a filler episode, and the worst part is that the next episode was able to make a filler episode actually fun. So this being a filler episode is, as Tennis Ball said,
No, skip.
1 out of 10. Pretty fun episode overall. The biggest flaw with this episode is the reversed music, because it's really noticeable in this very specific episode. Just take a listen for yourselves.
Anyway, since there was no voting last time, there's no cake at stake, so we can get right to the contest.
But besides that, the challenge is very fun, and like I said before, this episode proved that a filler episode can be fun if it has a fun challenge to work with. And also the rejoin announcement was pretty nice. It was cool to see everyone again after being eliminated. Not to mention the credits scene, that might be one of the most iconic moments of the entire season. 7 out of 10. Pretty great episode overall. You can tell the animation has improved a lot. The 3 new teams are nice, despite the squishy cherries becoming overpowered here. Blocky rejoining was probably one of the best choices from the first round of eliminated people, and the challenge is pretty simple but good, even though Snowball was at his dumbest here. 7 out of 10. This is kinda like the baking episode, as the first and main part of the episode doesn't even matter, which is pretty lame. That, and it's also unfair that the final challenge was literally set for another name to lose. The rest wasn't that bad though, as there were a couple of funny moments to salvage most of it from being actually bad. 5 out of 10.
I'd say Rocky, because golf ball sounds like a boy, even though she's a girl. That's just wrong.
Pen, you are a transphobe. Pen is going to be cancelled and will be eliminated immediately.
Despite Golf Ball's departure this episode, I can still say this was a pretty nice episode overall, as the challenge is fun, and it gave us another very iconic moment for the series. However, I do want to say that it's once again pretty lame that another name lost twice in a row, as it would have been nice to see the cherries lose once during this period of the season, but I guess it could have been worse. 6 out of 10. This episode might have the most reasonable elimination between the 3 eliminations with this specific method. It's arguably the only actual fair one for that matter. In any case, this new stage of the game is really cool, as the bonus points idea is super unique. I wish more object shows use this point system in their shows. The episode isn't amazing, but the idea over it is still really great. 8 out of 10. This episode has a pretty fun challenge, as well as it being iconic. However, a big issue I have with this episode is that the recommended characters are way too on the nose during the entirety of the episode, so I'll settle with a 6 out of 10. I gotta say first that there is another cool Rocky moment. Rocky fans were eating good during this first season. For the rest, I do have to say that Spongy rejoining was pretty cool. At first I found the rejoin lame when I first watched the series, but now that I see how much Spongy is hated in the community, I'm more okay with Spongy rejoining here. The rejoin challenge was very intense as well, so props for that as well. As for the actual challenge, it was pretty fun too, even if it was too short, but the one flaw of this episode is that they gave random points to tennis ball and armless people, even though that marble session is Eggy's first canonical appearance in the series. Even so, I still don't find it too fair to just turn points this way. 6 out of 10. Honestly, I'm not that big of a fan of this episode's challenge, despite the meme being funny.
Try to guess what's under this blanket.
Bonus points. Any version of Dream Island.
A previously eliminated
A
contestant.
dead body.
Hold on, Blocky, you're right.
And the idea of choosing between 2 challenges being really cool, which by the way should also be used more in object shows, but a thing
I really do not like.
is the following. Penn was in the top of the list for pretty much this entire time, and even if he didn't do as good as the average person, he was still having a really good lead against most people, so to see Penn fall so short during this episode really sucked, especially since I'm on the humble opinion that Penn was one of the most deserving people to win Dream Island, as he was probably the person to talk about Dream Island the most during the entire season. He really seemed like he wanted to win, but this episode set him up to fail and get eliminated the next challenge, so that sucks a lot. 4 out of 10. Despite the challenge being simple, it was both fun, and it was also used amazingly afterwards with a surprisingly interesting twist to subtract points to anyone you desire, that definitely left for great moments where people put a target on themselves, like Pencil and Leafy. And then after this first great twist, we also have the other twist of this episode, that being that everyone but Fairy was up for elimination. It really was a cool surprise to see everyone be put up for voting. The only real bad thing about the episode is probably the fact that armless people were excluded from the challenge, when they could have easily kicked the bowling ball to get some points. But besides that, this episode is really great overall. 9 out of 10. right, that's the one eggy joke for the episode. But anyways, overall I must say that this episode was very solid, with the only big complaint I have being the penalty that Leafy and Ice Cube received. It definitely shouldn't have been that bad. But besides that, the elimination was pretty intense since almost everyone was put up for voting. The challenge is once again simple but fun. The pairs that we got were pretty cool, and Ice Cube dying to the frisbee has got to be another peak comedy for this season.
Yay! Ice Cube! Now get to the other side. And catch this frisbee!
And the reveal that someone was gonna debut for the first time ever was really cool. It also makes me think what would have happened if anyone but David joined, because think about it. If we got someone like Marker instead, I feel like that his tattoo and his cool personality would have taken over Marker as a whole, and we might have seen a completely different version of Marker today. The same could pretty much apply for characters like Nickel, who might have actually kept his arms in later seasons as well. Basketball, who might have remained forever as a boy due to her originally being a boy and not a girl, or hell we might have seen Non-Existy, and yes, I'm still on the Non-Existy hype train. I'm gonna vote him whenever I'll get the chance, and you can't stop me. But anyways, because of the fact that we can think all day long of what would have happened if anyone but David joined, I'm gonna give this episode a solid 8 out of 10. The few good things about this episode are David, possibly being the best in terms of challenges and debatably comedy as well, because yes, I still think David is peak comedy.
Welcome to the competition, David. Your score is 0.
And the people from the tiny loser chambers plot of trying to escape, it's fun to see them try to escape but fail miserably, and I suppose the tournament challenge idea isn't bad. But there's a lot of things wrong with this episode, such as, why did Spongy and Rocky vote for Leafy despite her being nice to both of them so many times? And no, having arms isn't a valid excuse. Why is this episode so against Bubble? I don't even like her that much and yet I felt so bad for her when watching this episode. Why is Leafy now not so nice? Wasn't she the nice one? What actually happened here? Why is Pencil hating on Bubble alongside Leafy, despite Bubble quite literally being the closest friend that she has left? Why does Pencil get up for elimination after literally winning the challenge? There's just a lot of unpleasant and literal bullshit in this episode to actually enjoy it, so much so that I'm gonna give this episode a 3 out of 10.
Oh no!
Whoa, you can speak again? Doesn't that feel weird after 15 months of silence?
I cannot hold it in anymore. I just wanna...
This episode overall is pretty nice. The Bubble hate continues, but it's not as bad as last episode, and the challenge is once again simple but fun. David is once again hilarious. And there's even a little bit of announcer lore thrown in the episode at one point when we see the announcer's diary, which actually foreshadowed the gang getting to space next episode, which I think is really cool. 7 out of 10. The space episode was creative enough, I would say. Sure, it's nothing amazing, but it's also not bad at all. There were some great moments, like Spongy dodging all the lasers, or literally Black Hole appearing and tearing to shreds every single fiber of Spongy when he got sucked into the black hole. So yeah, pretty nice overall. Leafy was however annoying towards Bubble still, which sucks, but hey, the final rejoin has been announced, which is super cool to see everyone have one last chance to rejoin. Really cool stuff during most of the episode, that's for sure. 7 out of 10. I'm conflicted about this episode. On one hand, it is one of the most unfair eliminations of the entire series, like Snowball's literally made out of snow, why isn't he cooling the tiny loser chamber? But on the other hand, the entire last rejoin session is super intense, and Flower rejoining was the best way this last rejoin would have ended. Like, as much as Teardrop's elimination was unfair this season, what would she have done in this stage of the game? Well, she might have been a challenge beast, but I feel like Flower's antagonistic role is way more interesting and entertaining to watch. So honestly, I'm okay with Flower's rejoin. As for the challenge, it was kinda lame, but it's excused since it had to do 2 entire eliminations. This is also the first time we see Leafy teleporting with her map, so that's nice. Kinda wish that she did that more often in the series, but oh well. Overall, this episode is a mixed bag, so I think a 7 out of 10 is pretty good for this episode. This episode is definitely my favorite of this season, but let's talk about one thing at a time. First off, while the announcer being destroyed so casually was a bit off, I do think that the payoff was worth it, as we got to see Fury Speaker Box and Flower Speaker Box, a duo that dare I say is very underrated. These two go so well off each other to the point where they make an amazing duo. I just wish that they would have taken over for a couple more episodes. The elimination was also really good, which shouldn't come as a surprise for any regular viewer of my tastes, and the challenge is one of the coolest ones of the entire series. A volcano challenge is such a fun challenge, and I love how despite Fury being immune to lava, he still found ways to die, thus not making him automatically the winner of this episode. And while the way Flower and Fury got immunity may be seen as unfair, I still think that it's not that bad, and maybe it was even a little funny. 10 out of 10. This episode for the most part is nice, but it's really lame that almost every challenge is skipped in a matter of a minute or so, and I'm once again not a big fan of Bubble being mistreated so often by Leafy. It's not even funny at this point anymore, it's just making me sad. There's also Flower Speaker Box's death, which again is really lame considering that she and Fury Speaker Box worked really great. Maybe the reason why Fury Speaker Box wasn't that memorable in the next season is because he's missing Flower Speaker Box, as I feel like she was part of making Fury Speaker Box work better. But that's for another video. As for this episode, overall kinda lame, but not too bad either. 5 out of 10.
Michael, don't leave me here. Michael, help me.
As the second last episode of the season, this is really bad. The entire episode wastes so much time on the announcer deciding to cancel Battle for Dream Island, when we all know that isn't happening. Not to mention that there's a lot of filler in this episode, like the Blocky's funny doings ad, which isn't bad on its own, don't get me wrong, and also Yellowface's ad, which is the first moment we see Purpleface and quite possibly the only scene where he's tolerable and not annoying in the slightest. Oh yeah, did I mention that this episode made Yellowface literally racist?
No one wears non-slip shoes so hot anymore. Oh my gosh, you don't know anything. You're purple. Racist. Get this guy out of here.
Don't worry though, this was just a funny joke. It's not like that's gonna become part of his personality, right guys? Right? Anyways, the bug chase was cool I guess, and I did chuckle at this scene here.
What do we do about that canyon?
Jump over it!
Yeah. Yes, I'm gonna make it!
So this gets a 3 out of 10 instead of something lower. Okay. Let's get this finale out of the way. I personally don't think this finale is awful. Let me explain. In one hand, yes, Fury might have been the most petty person of this entire series by not letting Leafy onto Dream Island just for not wanting to die in his wheel of lava, but at the same time we've seen moments where Fury is actually a petty character. Just look at episode 16, where he takes points off Leafy for taking away points from his score, despite Leafy removing points equally for everyone, so it's not like Fury was never petty. With that said, yes, it still is really petty to just not let Leafy onto Dream Island, when he literally let everyone else in. You know, while I don't hate or even dislike Fury anymore, now that I rewatched the finale, I definitely understand why I used to hate him. Oh, and I wanted to say this as well before moving to the next topic of the finale.
We battled for 2 years to win Dream Island, and you just took it away from me!
You didn't let me in!
So what, Leafy? You couldn't have just waited to have a talk about it?
But isn't that wall soundproof?
Now I explained why this finale sucks, but here's why I don't think it's entirely bad. For this entire season, we've gotten used to every character die in one way or another, and then get brought back to life very easily. That's been established since the very first episode. And this finale gets rid of all recovery centers, which meant that death was actually gonna last forever, which is an insane concept for people that have gotten used to being easily brought back to life in a matter of seconds. The moment Flower popped Bubble, I thought to myself, oh shit, Bubble's actually gone, what the fuck? And then there's these other characters that also died, such as Woody and Flower, which made these deaths even more impactful considering there's no more recovery centers. I just wish that this concept was used more in the series, as it is a pretty dark theme that only this episode decided to discuss. We've heard of object shows that don't have the idea of recovery centers, but what about object shows that are used to recovery centers, only to then have that be taken away from them? This is another concept that I really hope will eventually be used in any object shows, as I feel like it would bring for some amazing concepts and ideas. In any case, I explained why this finale sucks, but I also explained why it's also really unique. So, what's the verdict? Well, to make things fair, as both points I made are equally fair, I'll just put this episode right in the middle of the tier list, getting a 6 out of 10. And that's it. Every episode of the first season of BFDI, ranked with a score from 0 to 10. Let's now do a quick view of every episode from worst to best.